Up next on Inside the SCCA, Chasing the Dream. Welcome to this episode of Inside the SCCA. I am Brian Bielanski. I don't know exactly which episode this is going to be because this is recording before the runoffs, and I think it may run the week after the runoffs when I am exhausted and don't want to do a show. Anyway, joining me right now is our guest all the way from, is it London? Where are you at?
I'm in Oxfordshire, so Bicester specifically, but just around the Midlands area.
Okay. How far is that from London?
I would say I think about 60 miles.
Okay.
From
all
Central.
right, so hour drive, hour and a half.
A bit longer than that.
Oh yeah, I don't know much about
Road
how
networks around here aren't the way they're supposed to be.
Well, I was gonna say I don't know much about how London traffic works. So if it's anything like L.A., it probably takes like 6 hours to go that 60 miles. So, well, welcome back to the show, Jason. This is your third appearance?
Yeah.
The first appearance was show number 1. We've well established that you were the first guest on the show. And I am so happy to have you back. We are here today. Well, so episode 1 was just this young up-and-coming kid. He just made his first trip to the runoffs at Indianapolis. How cool was that? And I've since talked to some people, and they've all said really great things about you as far as your driving abilities and how you're a great kid and respectful and wants to learn and he's a sponge and all this great stuff. And I'm like, all right, I picked the right guy for the first episode. Then I had you on the show when I found out that you were chasing the dream. You know, it's one thing to be a kid and have an opportunity to do some race car driving in the States, but you, on the other hand, are trying to make this a career, which of course a lot of kids do, some more successfully than others, some with bigger bank accounts than others. And we had you on the show to talk about how you can progress. This was the second show. And how you can go from being a karting kid to amateur race car driver and then possibly go pro. You now are in Europe, in England, competing in which series is it that you're in?
It's the United Formula Ford Championship.
Aren't there like 7,800 Formula Ford championships in Britain?
Well, that used to be the case,
Okay.
And then people realized that wasn't the right way to run a championship, so everyone just decided to come together and make it one. Hence the United.
Is that why they call it United now?
Yeah.
And is it really United, or are there still some offshoot series trying to do their thing?
So the United Formula Ford, and let me get into the politics of British racing.
I'm loving it.
For a moment. So United Formula Ford is an MSV, or Motorsports Vision, sanctioned series. So Motorsport Vision, owned by Jonathan Palmer, is basically the largest conglomeration of racetracks and organizers,
okay,
I would say, in the UK. So they own tracks like Donington Park, Brands Hatch, pretty much all the big places. They don't own Silverstone.
So they own everything but Silverstone. Pretty much.
Just about.
Okay.
I'm sure I'll tick some people off by saying that, but just about. So we're sanctioned by the MSV, and we run all around the country, and I mean that's the basics of it. But there are a couple of smaller club series. There's nobody that runs any national events. There's only people that would run a club season at the specific track, the most prominent being the Castle Combe series.
So any of the other Formula Ford series are probably more just local series at a particular track and not the national touring series like what you're doing.
Yeah, but I will say that local means a very, very different thing when it comes to the UK. When you think local in the US, you think of the club karting events, or even, with all due respect, the divisional SCCA
Sure.
or regional SCCA championships. But versus what happens over here, the regional SCCA stuff is where somebody might come to learn how to drive a race car
Right.
without having to deal with a lot of competition.
Sure.
What happens with the club events in the UK is it gets people that know a track, that are very, very good at one track and
Sure.
very good at one discipline. And that's nothing against the one, but, Castle Coombe, for example, they get many, many drivers every single race, every
Right.
single event.
Right.
And it is competitive, arguably just as competitive, if not more competitive than the National Series, because of how well versed these drivers are at this single track. Right?
Got it.
And it's the same thing with karting. You have A and B finals in the karting, in the club races over here in the UK. It's incredible, yeah.
So I don't remember if you were able to, I think the last time we talked, you told me something was brewing, but you couldn't tell me exactly what it was. And then a couple of weeks after the podcast, I saw on your Facebook page, I'm going to England to go Formula Ford racing. Can you talk with us a little bit how that deal came together?
Yeah. Gosh, it's so long ago now, it feels like, but really it hasn't even been a year. It all started really with the Team USA scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
I'd done a couple of Formula Ford races in the US, got in the eyes, started talking to that group, that organization, and the head of it, Jeremy Shaw, who's an incredible person. He's been around racing just in general for a very long time, been around Formula Fords for a very long time, and he adores racing.
By the way, you need to connect me with Jeremy. I want him on the podcast.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
I can see if I can make that happen.
That'd be awesome.
We've been talking quite a bit as I've been here in the UK, and I'm sure I can make that happen.
Cool.
But so he obviously leads the Team USA scholarship, and when I had spoken to him, his mindset was, if you want to be a professional driver in formula cars or just in general, you need to make the commitment to go over, sharpen your fangs, get out there and get beat up by a bunch of guys in the UK, right?
Right.
You need to experience something other than racing in the US because it's a completely different world out there. And while I wanted to do other things like, go to university, go to school, live a normal life, I knew that racing was what I wanted to do. And once I made that decision, I sort of realized that there was no way that I would continue a career in racing if I wasn't willing to make the commitment to come over to the UK.
Right.
So I think in October, I was put in touch with Phil Wills, and he just kept sending me texts, kept sending me messages, kept phone calls, all those things, until I really started to sit down and think about it, and it just was the right move to make.
Yeah.
So now I'm racing with him this year, and shortly after we agreed to race with him, the Ray Race Cars, the Formula Ford that's in iRacing,
sure,
they reached out to Phil once they heard I was coming, and they said, we'll give you a car to race.
Nice. That must help the budget for you.
Yeah, it does. And it's nice because, especially with the Team USA scholarship and how that had gone, they raced the Ray cars, and there's a lot of history with that team. Phil's got a lot of experience with the Ray.
Right.
So it just made sense.
So, if you want to be a professional race car driver in open wheel racing, and you're an American, you don't necessarily have to go to Europe to do it in America, but it certainly would. It's never a bad thing, right? I mean, the competition, everything I have seen is that the level of competition is so much tighter in European open wheel racing in the junior ranks than it is here in the States. Is that a pretty accurate assessment, especially in the Formula Ford, the really, really junior ranks?
Yeah, I would say so. I think when it comes down to it, you've got the main thing is not many people from around the world are going to be coming to the US to race.
Right.
Right. You've got the USF Pro ladder right now, and that's really the only major Formula car ladder there is right now.
Correct.
Unfortunately, the Formula Regional and F4 stuff hasn't really taken off this year, and that's a shame because I want to see that happen, but the reality is it hasn't. So when you look at the other options that are around, people are coming all over the world to race very specific series. FRECA, you've got GB3, GB4, British F4, a lot of those, FIA sanctioned series. That's what people want to be racing in.
Right.
So to stay in the US, you're going to get good competition, but you're going to get good competition from people in the US. If you go over to Europe, you're going to see competition from all over the world. Not that it's anything against the US drivers, but, there's a lot more of a pool of competition when you race against everyone in the world versus everyone in the country. And so I think that's where the good competition.
Well, and also it seems to be that the teams that are the next level up, whether it's in the U.S. or in Europe, are not looking, or the teams in Europe and in the rest of the world are not looking at the U.S. Junior Series. They're looking at more of the Junior Series over in Europe for their next drivers. Whereas the people in the U.S. are both looking at the U.S. Junior Series and the people in Europe for their next drivers, as we've seen. Lots of European drivers in IndyCar and in Indy Next, I guess they call it now. I have a hard time with remembering that. But so to be noticed to move up in either the U.S. or in a worldwide series, it seems as though you're going to get a better chance of getting noticed and picked up by being where you're at now, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you can take a lot of the drivers that are in IndyCar now as an example. I mean, for the biggest one being Joseph Newgarden. Right. He pretty much did the exact same thing that I'm doing right now, is went over to race Formula Ford. I believe he did a bit of Formula Renault as well, and then went back over to the U.S. and just started winning races.
Right.
So it's that kind of story of, you go over there, make a name for yourself on the world stage, and you come back a hero.
And it's you could look all the way down the line in IndyCar. I'm pulling it up right now. You've got Alex Palou. You've got, let's see here. Who else do we have here? Christian Lundgaard. And you've got Felix Rosenqvist. And I can go on. Rinus VeeKay, Marcus Ericsson. All of those drivers came to IndyCar after having European racing experience. So, and they skipped the entire, American ladder, except for maybe Indy Next. Some of them may have stopped there, but some of those folks came right from Europe and came to IndyCar. So it makes sense to, if this is what a young driver wants to do, that going to race in Europe is a smart thing. You talked about giving up and passing up on school. I left school early when I was a youngster. And I talked to my college instructor, and I had a job opportunity. And she said to me, school will always be here. You can always come back to the U.S., or for your instance, or you can always go back to school. It took me 27 years to finish my bachelor's degree, but I did it. So while I think that it's important to get an education, and I would never discount that, you have one shot at this as a young race car driver. And university will be here for the rest of your life. So I'm sure your mom and dad might not agree with me, but I've talked to your dad a lot. He seems very supportive of what you're trying to do, and so go enjoy this and give it your best shot. And I love that. So let's talk about your first season in Europe. It started out with a bang. I think you won the first weekend, right?
Yeah. So on track, I finished first in both races.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, one of the things I had to get used to was track limits.
Mm-hmm.
Something that doesn't really exist in the U.S. at all. Road America, Turn 5, for example, you can go as far off as you want and come back on no problem.
As long as you don't hit the wall.
Not here.
Yeah.
The tracks have cameras. They've got satellites that look at you and watch your every movement. And if you go over the track limits once, you get pinged for it.
Yeah.
And for some reason, looking back on it now, because I'm quite good with track limits now, But looking back on it doesn't make sense. I just tried to, I didn't, I tried to call their bluff. I think it's the best way to put it, because I kept going off, and I was just like, "Eh, are they gonna really, are they really gonna call me for track limits?"
Yep.
And they did.
Yep.
So I won the first race, no track limits issues. Second race, I got a track limits penalty and ended up coming third. So,
Okay.
but it was a good start to the season.
Yeah. Yeah. What's it like? How old are you now?
19.
19.
I turned 18 while I was here, or
Right.
19 while I was here.
Are you there with family?
No, no. That's something to get used to.
Yeah.
I'm living alone, right?
Yeah.
And being in a different country, it's a strange feeling. There's so many words that come to mind. There's so many emotions that come to mind. So I'm gonna try to do my best to talk about it concisely, but
It's a podcast. We don't have to be concise.
that is fair. Yeah. But I mean, there's so many parts, there's so many aspects of life that you have to adjust to, right? Obviously, for me, I'm a race car driver,
Right.
so I need to make sure that my performance as a driver is not being hindered by the fact that I'm living in the UK, that I'm living on my own. So adjusting to life in racing, that's one, and then you've got adjusting to life as just a human being, right?
Right.
So learning how to drive, learning how to navigate the grocery store, healthcare, banking, all these sorts of things you just have to get used to. And frankly, you have to get used to on your own, because there's nobody in my family that's been to Europe, really.
Right.
Nobody has lived in England since like the 1800s when my ancestors moved to America. So I'm pretty sure a couple of things have changed since then. So there's a lot that you have to take care of, and there's a lot that you have to learn.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's been a challenge on and off the track. And,
So,
but I think, yeah, I've been able to, grow as a person from that, and I've learned a lot of things.
So I'm sure there's people listening. People go away to college all the time, but when you go away to college, even if you go overseas, you're going into a setting that is filled with other kids who are going through the same thing, who are maybe away from home for the first time in a different country, and those people can band together and create their little posse, and you have people to talk to, you have people to hang out with who are all kind of going through the same thing. Don't have that infrastructure with what you're doing, right? That's got to be had to have been a little scary for you, right?
Yeah, it's so weird, because when I had first decided to come here, and even like the day before I was leaving, I wasn't nervous.
Yeah.
Because to me, it was like, we're still on Earth. We speak the same language.
That's true. That
mostly.
helps.
And I know, like, I felt prepared.
Yeah.
But I didn't prepare,
Right.
I just said, I'm going to go over to England and it'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been a little bit more than that, definitely. There's just things that I wouldn't expect to be different around here that are different. And then, like I said, just living alone has been an adjustment, because
Yeah.
even when I was away for university, like you said, I had classes, I had people
Right.
to take care of me. I was able to get food at the dining hall every day, and now I'm taking care of myself in a different country. And it's like being a professional athlete in like an Olympic sport. You go from being a college athlete to moving to just training on your own, taking care of yourself. And it's a very strange adjustment. Yeah.
So when did you go over? You went over in July, right?
No, I went over
What was it?
in the beginning of April.
Beginning of April. Okay. So you've been there now 5 months or so.
Yeah, roughly.
What and in the entire year, what do you think is going to be the number of race weekends you've got?
So this year we're going to be doing,
Ballpark.
the problem is the series took one race off the schedule. So now my numbers are all confused, and I haven't been able to sit down and think about it. I think we're doing 16 races, so two races
So
per weekend.
8 weekends.
8 weekends, and then of course we've got the Formula Ford Festival and the Walter Hayes, which I'm sure we'll get into later.
Sure.
So that's 10 weekends in total.
Okay, so 10 weekends. So what is life for Jason like when he's not at the racetrack on those 10 weekends? What are you doing? Is it free time? Are you at the shop working with the team? What are you doing with yourself?
It is simply when I'm not at the racetrack, I go to the racetrack. One of the nice things about being in England is there's a race going on at any point. Every weekend there's something going on.
Right.
And it's a small country. It's the size of my home state.
Right.
So I can drive anywhere I want on a last minute's notice. A couple weekends ago, I went to Snetterton for the day just to watch races.
Yeah.
The weekend after, I was supposed to be working. Didn't end up happening. So the night before, I looked at my phone. I was like, okay, well, there's a race going on here. Let's go there. And it's just about being in a new country and not knowing anybody in it, right?
Right.
You have to make your own friends. You have to start fresh. And so that's just what you do is you go to the track and you accelerate. The 10 years that I spent racing in the US, I have to do that all in about 1 to 2 years.
Yeah.
So you just get to the track and shake as many hands as possible, make as many friends as possible, and do it every single weekend.
So before we started the show, you pulled a pile of something off your desk there. Pick up that pile for me. Those cards?
Oh, the cards.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So
right.
When you go to the racetrack on non-race weekends, how many hundreds of those do you hand out?
Oh gosh. I've just ordered some new ones because we had this talk a little bit beforehand. We realized that my email was misspelled on it.
Yep.
But I'm getting contacts left and right, and it feels amazing to get the yeses and to have interest, especially with the success we've had this year. So, like I said, it's just going to the tracks and being able to meet people and putting my name in their phones or them putting, the other way around.
So
yeah.
So my wife is a salesperson, and she spends a lot of time going to these networking events, the Chamber of Commerce, lunches, breakfasts, and I am so not that person. I have such a respect for her because she puts herself out there, gets all gussied up, shows up at these things, smiles all the time, talks to people she doesn't know. And everybody thinks I'm an extrovert because I do a podcast, but I'm always talking to people about stuff I love, and she has to talk to people about, you have a shoe store. Well, maybe she enjoys shoe stores, but anyway, but you get to do networking events at the racetrack. Now, if my networking events were all at the racetrack, I would be all over that. Do you enjoy that part of it? Are you getting good at it? Because at 19, where do you get those skills?
It's definitely a work in progress, right? Every weekend, I find new things to say. I find new ways to say things. And, I look back on them and I say, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Or, hey, that was good. Let's do it again. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a ton of fun. And at the end of the day, when you get to watch the races, talk to the team about it afterwards, say, hey, that was an amazing race, or come up to them very gently and say, hey, what went wrong? It's a lot of fun to do. And it's a strange life to live. It's the way I would put it, because it's certainly, even a year ago, not what I expected to be doing.
Sure. You're over there with a team that knows why you're there. You're there because you hope to be at a higher level in the future. Whether it be, everyone has a dream of Formula One or IndyCar, so I'm guessing those are your big goals. Does your team help put you in front of people, help put you in front of opportunities that because they know why you're there and what you're trying to do?
Yeah. So Phil has been amazing. And this is one of, I would say, the advantages of being a single car effort. There's probably about a 50-50 of advantages and disadvantages. But Phil has been great with taking care of me. He's he's put me in front of a lot of people. And when I'm at the racetrack and I, say I'm at a British GT event, and British GT is supported by GB3 and GB4. So I can, text Phil and say, hey, I'm at this event. Do you know anybody there? And because Phil's been in racing for so long, he'll say, "Oh yeah, I know the team principal at so and so," and he just says, "Go ask for them. We know each other."
Mm.
So I can go up and say, "Hey, I'm racing for Phil Wills," and they look at me and they're like, "Oh yes, I love that guy," right?
Yeah.
Or so having that sort of that company, I guess, is really valuable. And then this year as well, I've been lucky enough that it's the right place and the right time. I actually have a manager now, and that's helped me set up a lot of meetings and get in contact with people, as well as just get other eyes on me. So he's been helping me with his network and just dropping my name places and giving me advice, because I don't know the people around here. I don't know what's good and bad about certain things, certain series. So he's been able to give me advice and sort of prevent mistakes from happening where I might be making them.
Yeah. I got a lot more to talk about here, but let's do some business. I want to thank all the people that help do the Inside the SCCA podcast presented by RaceSchool.com. Of course, RaceKeeper, the official in-car camera of Inside the SCCA. We had their camera in the car at Solo Nationals. We're going to have some video of that up here soon. We'll talk about all those folks. Great people there. Then, of course, we want to thank Ray Esports Racing, the official sim racing league of Inside the SCCA. That league is fantastic because most of the people in that league are racers on the real world racetracks, and they treat the league more like it's like there's actual consequences for taking out the people on the racetrack around you. That's why I enjoy racing with those guys and gals. Some really good people there. So thanks to Ray Esports. Then, of course, Solo Performance Specialties. Dave and his people there, hung out with them a little bit at Solo Nationals. Great group of people. Very, very entrenched in the solo community. Very, very supportive of that community. You could get their stuff at most of the Solo National Tour races, as well as you could order from them online. And then, of course, our presenting sponsor is RaceSchool.com out here in California with schools at Buttonwillow and Willow Springs. They also have defensive driving courses. Really, really great school. People come from all over the country out here. Well, weather's part of it. We got great weather to do it, but also because they just do a really, really fantastic job. If you pass the school, you end up, if you pass the right school, you end up with an SCCA license. You can go racing that weekend if you choose to. So thanks to all the folks there who do that. My guest right now, Jason Pribyl, coming to us from Oxfordshire. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
All these little shires and things in England, I get them confused. About an hour outside of London, he is out there chasing his dream of professional race car driving, and really having a great conversation here. We appreciate him being on the show with us today. I would say it's bright and early for me. We're recording this at 7 a.m. out here on the West Coast. What time is it there approximately?
It is 3:50, and it has been everything but Brighton today.
Yes. We're actually we might have more of your weather today than we're used to. But anyway, so you've already watched the F1 race. Don't tell me who finished, because I'm only about halfway through it. I put it on pause to come and do the show here this morning. So that'll be my next stop after this. A manager. How does that happen? Is that something that that Phil helps you, suggested that you do, made an introduction? I have this whole idea of putting a team together to get yourself where you want to go is fascinating to me.
Yeah. So that all started after my first race at Silverstone. I was introduced to a lot of people that were involved with historic Formula Fords.
Okay.
And I was speaking to them and just getting advice, right? Because I was very early in my time here at England, and I just asked them, what do I do? How do I prepare? How do I make this worthwhile? And one of them had suggested going over to see a man named Gary Ward, who had a sim rig in his shop. So
Nice.
he preps historic F3 cars and historic Formula Ford cars.
Cool.
So that's where they know him. They used to race with him back then, and he had a sim rig. So I thought, okay, well, I don't know any of these tracks. It's probably useful to at least have some time learning some of them. So I gave him a call, and right off the bat, he goes, yeah, you probably want to come over and do the sim rig. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
Sure.
It's about right. So I went over to his shop and just trying to learn as much about him. And he's a manager as well. So he does, prep cars, and that's where most of his money ends up coming from. And as well as that, he manages a few drivers. So I got talking to him and just getting an idea of what a manager provides.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of just started to realize that this was something that was going to be very valuable for me in my time in England and probably just later on in my career.
Sure.
He's someone that's able to give me advice, prep me for the future, contract negotiations, put me in touch with people. It's all sorts of things that are, things I wouldn't be able to do on my own, or at least it would take a very long time to be able to do on my own.
Right. Right. You said before we started that you had a rough season. We talked about how great the first weekend was. Talk to me a little bit. You had a pretty good shunt at one point in time. Whenever you get a new helmet mid-season, that's a bad sign. So talk about how the rest of the year has gone a little bit.
Yeah. So it's been difficult. I can't lie. It's hard to, I've learned a lot. Let's go with that. And it's just been unlucky a lot of the time. I think the next race after Silverstone, it just wasn't for us. It was the first time I had been to the track, Donington, and it just didn't really gel with the track, and it took me by surprise, right? After having won at Silverstone, I wasn't able to kind of jump back into it. The weekend after that, we kind of got some things sorted and went into Linden Hill and went 1-2. The interesting thing about that, though, was Donington, it's a very common track right in the center of England. So it's, a lot of people are able to go to it. A lot of people do go to it. A bunch of series have multiple rounds there. Linden Hill was a track where nobody had ever raced before.
Well, that helps you.
Seriously, it had just reappeared on the map. It was an old McLaren test track, and nobody had raced there. So the first time that I was there was also the first time that everyone else was there. So that's where it gave me a bit of a level playing field, and I went 1-2. So the two races I did, it was a great weekend for me. Since then, it's been, I don't want to call it downhill because that's a slippery slope, right?
Right.
But since then, a lot of things have happened. I've had a couple of shunts, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And it's just trying to catch up to the people that have been racing Formula Ford for such a long time. My main championship rival right now, because I'm still fighting for the lead, he's been racing for 5 years in Formula Ford, and others have been racing for 20 or so years. They started at my age, and they've just stayed in Formula Ford. So it's been a battle of trying to mitigate expectations, but also keep trying to be in the mindset of going to the weekend and trying to win, right?
So is there some, this is a cutthroat sport. If we've seen it, especially at the higher levels, if you get there and don't perform, there's 20 people behind you wanting that seat. Being that you're 19 and being that you're new in Europe, do they give you any grace as far as performances? Because, when you're going to tracks that other people have driven on 25 times and you're the first time there, to expect you to be on the pointy end of the stick there is I don't want to say unreasonable, but certainly ambitious. Do they take that into consideration at all when they see how the performances are going?
Yeah. So to be perfectly honest, I came to England and not many people had expectations for me, right?
Okay.
Nobody really knew who I was.
Sure.
And just some American kid. Obviously, once Silverstone happened, I got on people's radar. People started noticing me. Then Linden Hill noticing me some more. The first round at Brands Hatch was actually pretty good. We were fast. We just had an unfortunate DNF. But it's actually been me that's being told to, lower my expectations a bit. A lot of people aren't expecting as much out of me because they know how cutthroat this class specifically is, how difficult it is to win in this class.
Right.
And they've been around long enough to see the evolution of the drivers that are at the top right now. So, just this past weekend we were racing at Brands Hatch, and I didn't have a great weekend, and I was really down on myself. But my team and the people around me, they just told me, they're like, you can't expect to win against the guys that have been racing here for 25 years.
Yeah.
Like, they go around this track, they don't make a single mistake all weekend. You're still learning this track, right?
Right.
I've probably got maybe 2% of the laps that they do around here.
Right.
So there's not really the expectation to be at the top of my experience level, to be the fastest of the people that have the same experience as me is what they're looking for. So that's where the expectations lie with that. And they recognize the fact that this class is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you gave me some video to play. Where is this video from? Which track?
This is Brands Hatch.
Okay, so this is Brands Hatch, and I'll let it roll through a couple more times here. So I guess when you had that great success the first weekend, people really were like, "Holy cow!" Right? Because their expectations of you were zero, and you went out and were fast. Because I watched both those races before I realized that you had the track limits problems, and even I was like, "Wow!" I mean, I knew you were strong, but that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing, and I've actually been talking to a team that we're talking to next year, and at Silverstone they watched that race and said, "We want to sign him for next year."
Wow!
Like that happened right then and there. I only found that out just this past weekend. They told me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it was. I had Phil and my coach everyone was getting calls or texts just saying, "Who is this kid? Where did you find him?" Like, where did he come from? And the same thing with the announcers. Well, Jason's never raced Formula Ford, but he certainly knows how to drive a racing car. Right?
I was listening to him talk about you, and I was like, I know this kid. Give me a call.
So it's exactly that. I mean, there was a bit of surprise. And I was told once I had qualified second for the first race, I was told, they're not going to like you being up here, for this race. They're going to try to push you around because they know you don't have experience. Right. But I just went into that and said, all right, well, I'll play their game. Right. So there was so much going on, but it was a great feeling. It definitely was.
So that's an interesting concept or an interesting thought. And I was thinking about this earlier. Here in the States, for the most part, it's a pretty collegial group of people who race cars. And even once you get to the upper levels, when the drivers aren't with the helmet on, a lot of these guys get along, maybe more so now than they ever have. Back in the day, I understand it wasn't this way. But now, you've got the bus brothers, bus bros in IndyCar, and people seemingly like each other off the racetrack for the most part. With what you're doing, let's say if you weren't American, is that kind of the way it is in the paddock where people are kind of friendly and get along and stuff? And then when you add in a new American coming to try to rain on the parade, does that play into any of this at all?
I would actually say that, I mean, I'd like to say that we're all friends, right? Off the track. I have a great time talking to the drivers that I race against.
Cool.
We're all very friendly off the track, but once we put the helmets on, it's a completely different story.
Yeah.
But that's one of the nice things about this sport, and especially Formula Ford, is nobody wants to see the series suffer from bad attitudes off the track. So we want to make sure that we're all friends, and we're all here to have a good time at the end of the day. And we want to leave the weekend happy. And the best way to do that, if things don't go well off the track, or on the track, then at least have fun off the track.
So in your series, you're coming from overseas to race in this kind of pinnacle of Formula Ford in Europe. How many drivers are from other countries besides Britain who are trying to do the same thing you're trying to do in your series?
I think there's quite a few.
Okay.
And I feel bad because I don't entirely know which countries. I know there's South Africa.
Okay.
Which is actually pretty popular. A lot of South Africans will come over and race Formula Ford.
Sure.
But I know at Silverstone we had 5 different nationalities.
Great.
And for things like the Formula Ford Festival, we get upwards of probably 10 different nationalities in a Formula Ford race. So a lot of people come around all over the world because, I mean, the UK is the premier Formula Ford place, right? This is where people come to race Formula Ford, I guess. Is the best way to put it, yeah.
And are most of them there with aspirations of getting noticed and moving up in a career, or Are they just there to see what happens with racing in Britain in kind of the top level of Formula Ford?
So those that come from other countries, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what we want. We're leaving our homes behind. We're leaving our lives behind to chase our dreams, right? And there's plenty of people who are British that are racing Formula Ford for the
Sure.
same reasons. A lot of the paddock, though, is people that are plenty talented, very, very talented drivers that don't have the money to find a higher formula. So
Right.
they just keep churning out in Formula Ford because they love racing. They're happy to just keep racing. And what they want to do is race Formula Ford, or at the very least, they want to race, and Formula Ford is that option. So you get a mix of incredibly talented drivers that are just unfortunately not able to move on to other things, and international talents that want to, grow on the European stage.
Right. So, and maybe this is a tough question and maybe an unfair question to ask. And if it is, tell me to go pound sand. Um, are there, if other Americans wanted to do what you're doing, is it hard to get a ride over there? Or is it just make sure you can find a way to fund that ride?
It's definitely just find a way to fund it.
Okay.
There's plenty of cars, and the community is very strong in finding you a place,
Okay.
right? Because of the competition with, chassis and stuff, because manufacturers really want their chassis to succeed
Right.
in Formula Ford. So if you come and reach out to a team and they don't have any cars, well, they'll say, go talk to our guys and we'll find something for you.
Right.
For Americans, I would say to, reach out to myself maybe. It's hard to say which teams are going to be racing next year. I haven't actually paid too much attention to it because it's getting a bit dicey at the moment. But reach out to people like Team USA because they might have some more information as well. But it is really just you'll be able to find a place.
Yeah.
So as long as you bring the money, and the money, honestly, one of the reasons that I came here was because it was cheaper for me to move here and live in the UK and race Formula Ford in the UK than it is for me to race Formula Ford in the US.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
interesting.
it's great. Yeah.
So, and the reason I asked the question is, let's say I hit the lotto tomorrow, and I've got a bucket full of money, and I'm a racing philanthropist, and I want to help American kids go racing in Europe. I was wondering if it would make sense for an American team to go and establish roots in Britain and on the feeder series up to maybe F2 or something, and focus on providing rides to American drivers. But it sounds like if you can get the funding together, you don't really need that American team. They don't really care what your passport says as long as you bring the funding to go racing.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. Now, obviously, I'm sure we're talking in a fully hypothetical.
Sure.
But
gosh, I wish it wasn't. But yes,
should somebody, if there's anybody out there listening, there are ways to go about it. I know there's one particularly large team that is slowing down, right, with their operation. So if you wanted to do this, right, there's opportunities to buy an infrastructure that exists and pursue it through that direction. So there's definitely options, and there's opportunity everywhere. I mean, the nice thing is people in the UK are making Formula Ford chassis.
Yeah.
In the US, they're not really made. You just buy them off of other people. But I race a 2023 chassis.
Yeah.
Right? So they're modern cars, So people are still making them. If you ask someone to make a car for you, they'll make it for you.
Yeah. And you don't have to put it on a ship to get it here. Which is, I'm sure, saves you a bunch of money in that regard.
Yeah.
How many races left in your season?
We have 2 more races in the championship round.
Okay.
And then we've got 2 more races, which are the big races, the Formula Ford Festival and the Walter Hayes.
So do you have to qualify for the Formula Ford Festival and the Walter Hayes? And if so, are you already qualified?
So how it works is there are heats, and I think there's qualifying. But for both of these, there's a maximum grid capacity
Sure.
for the final event.
Sure.
And there's heats to, qualify you to get into the final event. And then they have a pre-final. And if you finish outside a certain, or I think it sets the grid.
Right.
I should know this. But
so
I think it either sets the grid or it qualifies you for the final.
Right. So you don't have to have anything to qualify just to go and try to qualify for the final. You can just show up with a car and go to your heats, and if you do well enough, you get to the final.
Yes. Yeah.
And at these two events, there was a lot of eyeballs there, and they're all looking for young potential drivers. Does that add to the pressure going into that, or do you just show up and do your thing?
I mean, it's always just I go into the weekend and I want to win.
Yeah.
There's obviously some pressure because this is unlike every other race. This is one event, one race, and you either win it or you don't. You don't get another try after. And so, of course, there's a lot of pressure. The spectators there are insane.
Yeah.
I think you get, at Brands Hatch, it's probably about 50,000 spectators for the Formula Ford Festival. And then there's 200 entries and only 32 make it.
Yep.
So there's pressure with that. You've got a lot of eyes on you and you want to be able to perform. But at the end of the day, it is the same story that I've had this whole season of nobody really wins it on their first try.
Sure.
I mean, you can if you do it right. And I think we're going into that with the mindset of we actually genuinely have a chance of winning these races, right? I've won at Silverstone. I've quick at Brands. So I've got these opportunities and, we're going to go into it with the expectation of winning. But, I mean, there's definitely probably a bit more pressure for those races.
Yeah, yeah. You made a trip to visit a rather substantially large and important race team recently. Can you tell us about that? Is that something you can talk about?
I can, yeah. So recently I got the chance to visit Alpine, which was amazing. It was, gosh, I don't know about the tour. There's some things I can talk about, some things I probably shouldn't. First off, I got the opportunity from Jeremy. Yeah, I got the opportunity from Jeremy Shaw.
Right.
So he, like I've said, we've been talking for a while. Unfortunately, the Team USA scholarship for Formula Fords isn't happening this year. So that's sort of, I mean, like I don't want to say out of the equation in a bad way, but it's just not happening.
Right.
In the same way, he supported some USF 2000 drivers that had won the scholarship in the past. And he talked to me and he said, hey, I've got a contact at Alpine. If you'd like, I can give you their contact and reach out to them and see what comes of it.
Yeah.
So I did. And I sent an email. I said, just, hey, I'd love to learn a bit more about your program, learn how to succeed really in racing. And I got the full tour. Nice. It was incredible. It really was. I was able to see the cars, and all sorts of cars too. I saw the 2023 spec chassis, 2024. I got up close and personal with them, and the 2005 Renault R25 was sitting in the lobby. I mean, that was an incredible car. To see that thing in person was, I couldn't believe it. Right, but to see the level that they operate is, I mean, it's a completely. Of course, I knew it was intense, but I did not realize it.
And they're one of the lower funded teams. So when you look at at what they're doing, and then you think about what maybe Mercedes or Red Bull are doing, it's got to be even bigger and grander.
Yeah. I think. I mean, with all due credit to Alpine, I think I'm not entirely sure what their story is. Obviously, they had a hit once the 2016 Renault switch happened, or after when they switched to Renault and then became Alpine after that, there was a hit to funding. And they're making a bounce back. They're doing really good this year, actually. And
do you know, is Alpine the team that has the Ryan Reynolds connection, the American funding connection? I think they are.
I think so, actually.
I'd have to go back.
I do remember hearing about that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get you connected with Ryan Reynolds and
I would love that.
Let him write you a check. Yeah, that's cool. And did the guy who gave you the tour, you said he apologized to you because the lobby was a mess?
Yeah. So there
You,
were trophies from the 2005 season just
yeah,
like strewn about the place at the time because they were, I guess, adding shelving or
sure,
something.
sure.
I looked at it, I'm like, dude, this is a Formula One car strewn in trophies from the
Yeah,
races that Formula One car won.
yeah,
I don't
exactly.
care what it looks like.
Exactly.
It's awesome,
And
right?
the fact that you're this 19-year-old guy from America who's racing Formula Ford coming for like the tour of a lifetime and he's
Yeah.
apologizing to you just cracks me up.
Oh yeah. I mean,
But
he's an incredibly humble person and
yeah,
I'm talking to him more. Um, I mean,
it's
it was incredible. Yeah.
yeah, it speaks to though what that to me says is that, whether you're in Formula 1 or Formula Ford, we're racers and we're all kind of, not even kind of, we're all the same people. Yes, he's at a different level and but by a long shot. But he was, I'm sure, where you are 20 years ago, 10 years ago. So we all come from the same humble roots. No one starts working for Alpine or any of these teams. They've got to start somewhere else. And I'm sure he sees in you a little of what he was 20 years ago. I don't know who you talked to, and I don't need to know. But I'm saying, and so the fact that he's apologizing to you, it just kind of speaks how we're all on the same level, no matter what series we're in.
Yeah. And to a little bit about what you said, I've actually started experiencing this a little bit myself. So some people have been contacting me about Formula Ford
Yeah,
racing here in the US or in the UK next year. And I'm happy to guide them a little bit,
nice.
help them make the right decisions. And I mean, not that I'm saying I'm suddenly Formula One level, all this and
Sure,
that, but I share the knowledge that I've gained over this year, and I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to help people in the same way. So I totally get where he's coming from, and I try to replicate that as much as I can. Yeah.
we're coming up on the clock here to start wrapping this thing up. Let's talk a little bit about, you've mentioned it a couple of times. You've said the word next year a couple of times. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've got planned for next year?
Well, I can't say anything just yet, unfortunately. As much as I really want to
Sure.
be honest, the contract's not signed, so I can't. But there is talks of a contract, so we're putting something together for next year. What I can say is it has a four in it. So
Oh,
I'll,
well,
I'll go that far, give a little bit of a
sure,
tease.
sure,
But past that, there's not much I can say
sure,
to it. But we're looking at something, and I'm sure next year will be amazing.
sure. So it's safe to say that if all goes as is planned, you will be somewhere in Europe racing something next year.
That is a good way to put it. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Um, what has been the craziest or the coolest experience you've had on the racing side of things since you've been there? Is it someone you've met? Is it going to a track you've dreamt about? Is it stepping on the podium for the? I mean, what is obviously stepping on the podium is awesome. So I mean, let's give that as a given. But something that maybe we wouldn't think about. What is kind of the coolest or craziest thing you've experienced so far?
Ah, there's a lot of tough ones. Um,
You can name more than one.
yeah. Obviously, like you said, the podium. Being able to stand on the Silverstone podium,
Oh, I have another question
right?
about that. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. So when I won at Silverstone and when I came third, to be fair, I was able to go up on the podium and that was an incredible feeling, getting the bottle of champagne, holding the trophy, standing on the top step was, I mean, that's a feeling, right?
Yeah,
Uh, and at such a place too. Visiting the Alpine F1 factory,
sure.
another just surreal experience for me. Uh, just nothing could have prepared me. Nothing could have let me believe that like 2 years ago.
Right.
Oh yeah, you're getting tours of F1 factories. You're standing like to be able to do those things. It's not something that I would have expected, right? So those are very magical moments for me. I think my favorite moment has got to be my win from Linden Hill right now.
Okay.
That was incredible because of the quality of the win, I would say. after Donington, I had a terrible round at Donington, and because I won at Silverstone, there were high expectations going into that round, and I did terribly. So to make sure that it wasn't a fluke, that I didn't just win by chance, that I didn't get anything, you know, it wasn't just handed to me, that I was a good driver. And that was a lot of, for myself and for other people, but mostly myself, is can I actually do this? Am I actually the quality of driver that I think I am? So to win at Linden Hill and the way that I won by leading from start to finish, that helped me a lot.
Sure.
And that meant a lot to me. And that was a great feeling to cross the line. It was an incredible race for me. I did like that one as well.
Cool. Now, when you did a little video of you packing to go to a race weekend, and one of the things that cracked me up or kind of went, you take your own American flag with you? Is that so you can hold it on the podium, or do you have to give them a flag so that when they raise the flags, they have an American flag to raise?
That is for myself at the podium.
Okay.
They don't raise the flags or anything like that, but as an American racing in another country, I want to do my best to represent it, and it feels amazing to wear it when I'm on the podium.
That's awesome.
To have pictures with it, to represent my country while I'm racing in another place. And I mean, obviously at the beginning of the year, I thought about that and I went and bought one.
Yeah.
And I forgot it at Silverstone. But every other race I've been able to. And then when other American drivers come, I get pictures with them with the American flag as well, because I want to make sure that everyone else is, representing in the right way. And it's just a great feeling. But yeah, I always take that and I make my manager carry it around. He's British. So
I love it.
But I always say, I'm like, before the race, take this so that when I get to the podium,
you
can give it to me. So that's a fun little thing.
I'm playing the video from Brands Hatch again while we're chatting here. So two more questions before we wrap this thing up. Did you take your sim rig with you over there, and are you using that on a regular basis, or do you have a sim at the shop you can race on?
I actually haven't touched a sim rig since my manager, his name's Gary. I'll stop calling him my manager. Gary sold his sim rig.
Oh.
So he no longer has it. I had access to that, but that's long gone. I don't have a sim rig here. So every track that I learn for the first time. Castle Coombe, for example, first time I was there was the Tessia right before the race.
Yeah.
Brands Hatch is a different story because I've been able to do some testing there, and same thing for Snetterton. I'll be able to be doing some testing there as well. But it is interesting to have to learn these tracks, and I always use sim racing in general as a learning tool more than anything else.
Sure.
And specifically learning the tracks, because although this is a rare occasion where my car is actually in iRacing, it's never the same, right?
Sure.
It'll never be able to capture it, so I don't want to build any bad habits. So I actually usually run a different car on the tracks when I'm driving, just to make sure that it's different enough that I'm learning the layout, but not learning the car.
Interesting. I would have thought you would have at least thrown a wheel and a pedals in the suitcase, or at least picked one up when you got there, because I think that would be a good tool. And I'm guessing some of these tracks that you've never been to might not even be on any of the sims either. That's probably part of it too, right?
Yeah, I mean, iRacing specifically doesn't have too many of them.
Right.
Linden Hill, I don't think is on any sim rig. Hopefully it will at some point, because it's a super fun track.
Cool.
Castle Coombe is probably on, like I said, a Corsa, so I would probably be able to figure out for some of these. But a fair number of these aren't on sim rigs.
All right, my last question before we let you go is, I asked you a crazy thing or a cool thing that's happened racing related. Same question, non-racing related. What's it been like 19 years old in England for the first time alone? Any great stories that you could tell about stuff you've been able to do outside of the racing world?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple. First of all, I don't live too far from Oxford. So while I'm not in Oxford, because it's pretty expensive to live there, and there's a university there, I don't want to get involved in that. I've been able to go a couple of times, and I'm planning on going soon again.
Yeah.
And it is so cool. The architecture there, the style of buildings, the style of city, right? It's a very walkable place.
Okay.
It's so cool. And when I went there the first time, I had a blast. I was marveling at everything there. And every time I go back, it's the same thing. Even when I'm seeing the same buildings, I just look at them and go, I mean, who in their right mind built that? Right?
Yeah.
It's so cool. I've also been helping out with a kart team in the UK, and we got the chance to go to Wales. So I've been to Wales now.
Okay.
And it was sort of the same story. It's a beautiful place. And while it was just kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it was rainy and it was cold and it was kind of miserable, I had a blast just being able to look at everything. And, the mountains, the hills. It's a beautiful, beautiful area, beautiful country.
Do you have a car or do you use public transit?
I do have a car, but I do use public transit as well.
Yeah.
So the car is obviously good to getting to the track. I don't really want to take my race gear on a train with me.
Yeah.
Don't feel comfortable doing that. But when I can, I prefer to take public transit, and it is very good here.
Yeah.
Although it's like in the US, it's not that bad either. People just don't use it.
Right.
I think it's the main issue. But it's nice over here to have that option.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I guarantee that there are lots of people you need to say thank you to, and this is the time for that. So get after it. Do your thank yous and all that. Yeah.
I mean, for starters, obviously, I have to thank my family and my dad and my mom for letting me do this, right? It went back to the whole, you're not going to get this opportunity again. College will come later, right? And they were the ones that actually told me, they said, do this because you're not going to be able to have this opportunity ever, right? College will come later and, we'll figure it out. So I really want to thank them because they helped me get to here. And, my dad has been helping me with advice, just keeping me sane for the moment. And I'm so grateful for how hard they've worked. Obviously my manager, Gary, who's been super helpful in keeping me upright. My dad's not able to be at the track. So, we need someone to take care of me while I'm racing. And Gary's been there. He's been super helpful. And he's been there for me when I need him. Phil works so hard, the team owner, and really he's the chief of everything around there. And he just works so hard every weekend and during the week. He's on that thing 24/7.
Yeah.
And Gavin Ray for providing the car, Ray race cars, incredible stuff.
Yeah.
And most recently Cliff Dempsey, who some of you may know. He's been helping me with my car as well this year, and he's very experienced with these cars.
Yeah, cool. All right, I lied. It's not my last question, but this is my last question. Has Mom and Dad had a chance to get there to see any of your racing? And if not, are they coming out for Goodwill or the Formula Ford Festival?
So my dad was able to come. He came along with me for the first 2 weeks while I was here. So he helped me move in, and then we did one test day and then Silverstone.
Okay.
So he actually did get to watch me race at Silverstone. And I'm sure that would have been awesome. Quite an experience because it was such a great weekend and it was so successful. And he was able to stand up there on the podium as well with me after the race. So great feeling to have him there. And so he's been able to come. My sister visited a little while ago as well. And that was fun as well, seeing her again, but my mom hasn't gotten a chance to yet. So we were planning on later this year, but we're thinking, I'm going to be here next year, so we can wait.
That's awesome. So that's pretty definitive. So we're going to be here next year. So that's awesome. Jason, I'm just so pleased to be able to kind of follow your path along this trip that you're going on, and I'm just so impressed with everything I've seen, kind of lurking in the weeds here, watching from afar. And I wish you only the best of luck. And if people, let's do this real quick before we let you go. I'm sure there's people watching. It takes money to do what you're doing. If they want to be part of your future here, if they got a business they want to slap on the side of a car in Britain, how do they get a hold of you? And let's spell the email properly this time.
Oh gosh. So yeah, obviously, so we've got a website, and our website has a lot of contact information.
Okay.
And I'll send you my email because it's a process, but it's chiefduck at jasonpribylautosports.com.
That's why
That's
you,
our email.
you spelled it
And
wrong. You
then-
can't even remember it.
Exactly, right? That's the worst part.
Uh,
But yeah, I mean, for next year, we've got the team I'm running with, or I'm hoping to run with, does have some team sponsors. So if you're interested in genuinely participating in motorsports in the UK, do you have an international business or are interested in an international business? You know, we do B2B stuff, and we have a network here now. So that's always an option, and please reach out if you like that. But we've got our website. You'll find our contact information there. And then as well, we'll spell it out, chiefduck at jasonpribylautosports.com.
and even if you just want to help an American get to the next level, that's okay too. We'll put all of that information in the show notes with the website and email address, so you don't have to remember it now. But Jason, thanks a ton. I really appreciate it. Good luck, and we will when you know what you're going to do next year, let me know, and I'll make sure I talk about it on the show.
All right, I will do. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me this time and the last few times. Being able to talk about this and to talk about my journey has been amazing, and I'm super happy with how it's gone so far. And I'm happy for you. I'm happy to be able to watch this, kind of grow, not alongside me as it were, but at the same rate. And you've been doing great.
Yeah, it's been fun. So, all right, that is going to do it for another episode of Inside the SCCA presented by RaceSchool.com. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to the RacingWire Podcast Network and the Racing Network on YouTube so you won't miss any episodes. Also, it'd be great if you leave a comment, especially if it's a good one. Follow us on social media to find out who our next guest is and leave a question. On Twitter, it's RacingWire Info. There's a new Inside the SCCA every week. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a fantastic week, even a better weekend. Stay safe, and go play with cars.
Hi, I'm Kelton Jago, and this is Inside the SCCA.
Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the RacingWire Podcast Network and Rule 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guests, and not that of the SCCA.